SharkNation. We've got another special guest here. I know last week we had our friend Eric from Barcelona on, and we're going to go a little bit more local here. We've got Hannah Kathleen Hawkshaw on the line here. How are you doing, Hannah Kathleen?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Mark Baker's also over there in Glenageary. How are you doing, Mark?
Yeah, good to be here as always. Welcome, Hannah Kathleen.
Thank you. And I also have a special guest with me today, my dog. You know, this is the beauty of the pandemic lifestyle, isn't it? I'm not home, so my Yorkshire Terrier is here beside me, and I'm hoping he won't be joining the conversation. Scruffy is his name.
Okay, Scruffy, you're also very welcome to the SharkPod today. So today, like we were just talking before we actually started here on the podcast, trying to get to know each other a little bit. So Hannah Kathleen, we invited her on the podcast because we want to talk to people out there in Ireland who are like doers. That's what we were talking about beforehand. We've had all types of people on the podcast, whether that's people who are entrepreneurs, artists, marketers, like salespeople. We've had all types. We've got someone from Google to come on and tell us how to do Google ads better. All these types of things. But Hannah Kathleen, your background is really interesting. You seem like you've packed a lot into such a short life here. So my first question is, okay, well, actually, let's go back to the beginning here, just to give some context for the listeners. CEO and founder of iGen Creative, a marketing and branding agency. Mm-hmm. Organizer of the Stimulus Summit with the co-author of the Rich Dad Poor Dad. I had that written down. I couldn't read my own writing there. As well as, I guess Instagram personality, blogger going back years, over 100,000 followers on Instagram, all that type of stuff. International speaker, musician. That's there's a lot of unpacking to do here.
The quicker question is, what don't you do?
That's a good, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things when we were talking before the podcast about a doer personality, I would say that I have definitely, my dog is joining me, as you can see, sorry about this. But basically in my life, it's kind of been a random mix of a lot of different things that I didn't necessarily fully intend or start out with the goal to do. But what I would say is from my experience, a lot of it's just been a natural progression. And I'm a very artistic personality type. I love to create, and that's obviously seeped its way into many different ventures that I've started. So my life is a bit of a mix. I'm a singer-songwriter. I started as a fashion blogger. So that's how my entrepreneurial journey began when I was 13 years old. And since then, a lot of things has happened, from, speaking very frequently to co-organizing this Stimulus Summit that I mentioned with speakers, including the likes of Sharon Lecter's, the co-author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, and some incredible speakers that we have lined up for the next one as well. And then obviously my company is iGen Creative, and I'm very passionate about building brands and creating visual identities that really represent a message that matters. So there's a lot that I do, and I mean, I certainly have a jam-packed day usually, but I love it. And I think it's the best people to work with are busy people. So that's what I like to think anyway, within people that I work with. So
100%. And when you started your blogging career at like 13, what was the platform that you're using then? I bet it was pretty different than the way things are now.
Yes. I mean, I started my blog back in 2010. So obviously internationally blogging was happening, but in Ireland it was very new. So I remember when I started my fashion blog, there were like 5 other fashion bloggers that were really kind of on the scene. And basically I just stumbled across blogger.com one day and decided to start this fashion blog. It was at a time when I was very sick. So I was off school. Okay. I had a few different things wrong with me at the time, from glandular fever to ME to the swine flu. My immune system was just completely wiped out, and it meant that I couldn't go to school. So, as a 13-year-old teenage girl, first week you're off school, you're thinking, okay, great. Second week, all right, okay, I can handle this. Third week, fourth week, fifth week, you're becoming fed up and really bored. And so I've always been a creative personality, as I mentioned, and just one day, God knows how I found it, but I stumbled across blogger.com and I thought, I'm going to start a fashion blog. And it was completely for myself. It wasn't something that I actively shared with my family or friends for about 2 years, actually, but it started to create opportunities for me. And I started to learn the power of building a personal brand and attraction marketing without any intention of doing that. It just happened because I was taking action. And it then inspired me to pursue more possibilities that the internet could bring, because I was dealing with challenges in my personal life with my health.
Absolutely. It's so interesting as well, because when you go back to 2010, you said like blogger.com. I think it's been bought out, or it's been, a lot of changes that have happened since then from a platform.
For sure.
But that attraction marketing is still what people are. It's still the most effective thing. I've got partners all over EMEA, and I always think as well, like marketing. It's hard to you just putting, especially like in a big B2B company, just putting money into advertising without any kind of branding or messaging. It doesn't really work as much as if you can just have a coherent message.
Exactly.
So when you were blogging there, would you mention that it was a couple of years before you told people about it? Were you still like publishing them like with a different like persona or like a avatar or something? Was that the way?
Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago now, to be honest with you. But when I started, my parents knew about it, but nobody else, none of my friends, none of my extended family really. And I started just posting with my personal name. So it was called Hannah's Fashion Blog. Very original.
I like it.
But simple. I mean, you know what it is. So I started that blog, but basically it was just me documenting at first my interest in fashion. So I was, writing about handbags and runway shows and so forth. But then I realized when I was about 14, 15, that the blogs that I was enjoying reading the most were the ones that were personal style blogs and documenting the individual's journey, which again, it emphasizes the importance of your personal brand and how it can differentiate you regardless of what industry you're in. And so basically I saved up and bought myself a camera, taught my mom how to take my pictures and my dad subsequently. And I mean, I took my dad to London Fashion Week, for example, as my hot date. So it was definitely an interesting journey, but it was something that over time really helped me to obviously engage people, but also to build my confidence. And I started to put myself out there and started going to these events when I was about 15. So these press days with top models, designers, actors, influencers. And I was thrown into this environment where I had no idea, no practical experience of how to network. And I started learning at such a young age. And that's something that I have taken with me, I think, as I've grown. And is something that I believe is so important, again, regardless of what industry. I just happened to start with the fashion space, but it was definitely a figure it out as you go along. But as you said, the attraction marketing element, I think when you can attach yourself to a story, it makes it so much more interesting. It's like I always say, if we're all selling an iPhone, what makes somebody choose to buy from me as opposed to you, and vice versa? It's the individual, it's the connection, it's the story, and the connection that you're building with an individual, and that stems from your personal brand.
100%. And you touched on something there about putting yourself out there, and that kind of making the difference. I remember during the week, Mark sent me a video of his daughter making she has like a YouTube thing where
Amazing.
it's like was it Roblox or something?
It's a game. It's like, it's one of the biggest games for kids online.
But she's like editing videos and putting it on YouTube, and she's 8 years old. I'm like, when I was 8, know anything.
She's so passionate about it. She uses Canva to do the covers, and I just had to show her once, and that she's so obsessed with it, like that.
Yeah.
I didn't have to guide her from then on. And I was like, what? I sent the video because I wasn't really keeping an eye on it, and I probably should as a parent. But she had like 650 likes on or watches on a video, like, on all these likes, and I was like, oh my god, I showed you this, a couple of weeks ago, and all of a sudden, like, such a demand for gaming online, obviously with kids, is huge as well.
She's willing to put herself out there like that young. I mean,
but you know what I think is really fascinating, and this is something I've had intense conversations about with some parents before, is the power and opportunity that lies in online for young people. But obviously, as a parent, now I'm not a parent yet, hopefully in the future I will be, it's scary, because your kid is going online to the big bad world, and essentially anyone can find what they're up to. But at the same time, as you just said, there's so much opportunity. And when you can identify the positives and nurture, I think, in the right way and kind of showcase as you did, like this is how you can use it in a way that can create a skill set for you or something for you to create more opportunities that you want to experience or people that you want to meet or whatever you want to create, then it can really build a skill set for an individual that's practical and can actually make a difference when building a career. And I think now the term influencer or blogger before was, what is that? It's not a real job. And now it's a career opportunity.
Yes,
I think the world has changed a lot. And I think it's important to embrace that and, positively nurture young people in discovering how to utilize it in a positive way, because they're going to use it whether we like it or not.
Yeah. And you've probably been there from the start, and seen the evolution of all the different forms of social media, personal branding. How fast does it change? Is it changing every single day? Like there's TikTok now. We're not even on TikTok. People are telling us you should get on. We think we're too old, but
yeah, I mean, I think obviously we all know how fast paced these things move, but I think the main thing is just to realize that all of these tools are just vehicles to reach more people. And it's about identifying the vehicles that you choose to focus on and choose to spend time nurturing and to develop your voice on those platforms, but more importantly, to develop your voice so that people aren't focused on engaging with you on just one platform and it's you they want to engage with, not the channel. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's quite an interesting thing, and just understanding that it's more than just an individual social profile or an individual, I don't know, YouTube series that you're doing. It's about defining who you are and building a platform to promote your personal brand and looking at that as an entity as well as your company or project. Because one thing that I think is quite important is to recognize that we all have different projects. This is something that I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs about who haven't been tapping into their personal brand, and they say, I want to focus on my company. And that's like, of course you want to focus on your company. Of course, it's really important to do so, but you should also realize that that's only one project that you're doing, and it might be your focus now, but it may not be your focus in 5, 10, 15 years time. So if you also put energy into building your personal brand, that's an asset that can carry you across everything that you do and be that umbrella brand that, is the platform to springboard from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Even I have almost opposing interests with the art background and then finance.
I understand that.
Yeah, you'll know,
Yeah.
like finance recruitment, but often, like very often, I'll get clients and candidates speak to me and we'll be chatting on and on and on. And at the end, they'll go, I saw your painting on LinkedIn. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And it's just, so they'll remember me. Like, because people talk to different recruiters, but they'll remember me as the recruiter who did that painting, So I still get to leverage the kind of personal brand, and even though it's completely different.
Absolutely.
It's sorry to interrupt you, Luke.
No, good.
I was just going to say it's really, for me, an interesting conversation though, because I had debates with myself and battles with myself around this, because obviously talking about brand and being so passionate about brand, specifically personal brand, I recognize also the importance of establishing yourself as an authority in a certain space, or building your voice around a certain topic to create resonance with whoever you want your audience to be. But also when you do that and neglect other facets of who you are, you can potentially limit yourself. And this was what I found. There was a period when I really focused on my entrepreneurial side and wasn't actively promoting my music side and was doing that very much behind the scenes. But I felt, one, that I wasn't being myself. I wasn't showcasing really and truly who I am. And also in doing that, I was losing out on a lot of conversations or engagement opportunities with people who, when I was talking about the music in conversation with them, so even if I wasn't presenting it, in terms of my brand assets, that was what was engaging with them or making them more interested with who I am, and vice versa with music and business, in terms of them kind of switching. And it's something that I think is really important to promote now, in terms of course, you want to focus your messaging in terms of different marketing campaigns and so forth, but to embrace the different facets of who you are. I always say it's like a diamond. A diamond has multiple facets, and so do we. And you should embrace that, because that's what makes you unique. And that's what, as you said, connects people with you and your ideal a business partner or client. Of course, it depends on the industry and niche and the product and individual in question, but it can really open up so many more doors that wouldn't have been opened had you been focused solely on one element of who you are.
It's such a, it's something I think about often, what you're talking about there, when I look at LinkedIn, where people are almost like, this is just my business face. They might be, what's the most interesting about them might be the other 6 things that they do in their spare time, the stuff that would make you want to do business with them, or they put out a very like kind of a sterile post, about the COVID lockdown with a screenshot of a Zoom link, and kind of, instead of telling people how they really feel, or putting up something else that they're doing that might be more interesting than that, because we're all kind of in the Zoom land right now anyway, so it's not going to be very easy. But I think about it all the time.
On LinkedIn, I think people, because it is a business platform, people tend to try play it safe, and in my opinion, play it over safe, a bit too safe.
Yeah.
Some of the most memorable things you see, it's what make you stop when you're scrolling is what's most important. Even if it is LinkedIn, there's definitely a line on LinkedIn. You have to be careful. It's certainly not like every platform has its own personality in a way, so you have to abide by that to an extent. But certainly, I just think some people mightn't be able to understand how individuals can be actually really, really good at several different things. They might say, like, she's really good at this and she's kind of doing that on the side. Why can't she be actually really good at 3 things?
Yeah, and this is a debate that I think is going to be a continuous debate for years to come. But I came to the conclusion that, in order for people to become more comfortable with that, there have to be individuals being practitioners of it. And, sometimes it means breaking out of the typical box. And I know, for example, with certain people in my life, they've really struggled with the idea, like people who've been close to me really struggled with the idea that, oh my gosh, I can be an entrepreneur, but I can also go and compete in Miss Universe Ireland, or I can also be a singer-songwriter and launch a single, or, run a business and go into a boardroom with people who are, 10, 20, 30 years older than me and be leading a presentation. It's just incomprehensible at times. But at the same time, when you just do it and end up in those environments, then every time you're doing something, you're breaking a boundary. And I've literally had people, at times in terms of stereotyping, I'm a 23-year-old blonde woman, and I would say that I'm quite feminine in my presentation and so forth. And at times I've been underestimated when I've been, gone into rooms, and that used to bother me. But then I just figured, it's just fact. So I just need to, every time, if they're the right people to engage with me, they'll see that I know what I'm talking about. And quite often it's happened where I've had people apologize to me. Like, I remember one time in particular, I was giving a presentation in Cardiff in Wales. And after I spoke, a gentleman from the audience came up and said, listen, I really want to apologize to you, because when we were at the speakers dinner last night, I wasn't expecting you to deliver the value that you delivered, but actually I was taking notes nonstop. And I thought, okay, well, we've made one person understand that you can be more than one thing, or you can,
you can, in a way, you've skipped the queue in a way. People might think that you have to put a certain amount of years in before you're able to talk about certain things. Skipping that queue is something, again, that we talk about and we
talk about a lot.
It's an interesting concept, because my story has been quite unconventional in certain ways. So I started my blog when I was 13, time when I was very sick, as I said. Then when I was 16, my health took a turn. I was really not well, to the point that I needed to be in a wheelchair at times. Like, I used to sit at dinner and feel like I just couldn't pick up my knife and fork. I was just so exhausted, and my teachers were noticing and pulling me out of class and stuff. So basically I took the decision with my parents to take some time off, and the intention was to go back. But during the time off, I spent all of my time building my skill set and transitioning my entrepreneurial mindset from fashion blog to online marketing, and learning about how the same strategies that I'd applied can actually help other businesses and industries and so forth, and building that skill set. And then I decided to focus all of my energy on that and never went back to school. But then obviously, to a lot of people, going to university sometimes is, oh my gosh, that's not normal. And then, oh wait, you didn't finish high school or secondary school. Sorry, I talked to so many Americans. You didn't finish secondary school. It's like, oh my goodness. But at the same time, I've been working on my skill set since I was 13 years old. So that's 10 years of energy and late nights. I used to stay up for hours watching webinars and editing my HTML and, playing with ideas and investing in cameras and things that would help me move forward, and coaching and mentoring and different things to just constantly learn. but it's a different form of learning. And so one thing that I'm very passionate about is education, but recognizing that education does not always mean the typical set route that's paved for us, because different people thrive in different environments. If you have an issue like a health issue like I had, you need to figure out another way to learn. That does not mean you should be discounted, because when you find the environment that you can thrive in, then you can make the impossible happen, and you can do things that wouldn't have even been on your radar.
It's like we've talked about this a few times on the podcast as well. Me and Mark kind of we have a different kind of view on the education stuff. I would suggest that because of the internet and because of how granular you can get with subject matter that you're interested in, you become an expert kind of in anything. Even with, like, I did a Udemy course, and it was, I was kind of like slagging off these online courses, but it was the most value I think I've ever got in a few hours. I was trying to learn a particular thing with software, but when I graduated college, I spent 4 years just doing my regular degree, and then when I left, I realized you could do it 2 nights a week for the 4 years as well and get the same degree. I could have been doing something else with my time all day instead of kind of lazing around the quad, and it just seems like there's better ways to spend your time. So I think Mark has a little bit more, like, he thinks that type of stuff stands to you, but I think in this case, especially if you kind of know what you're looking to do, you're saying that you got into this type of lane when you were like as young as 13, and then kind of ran with it. You had your dad holding up the camera at a fashion week and all that type of stuff. So you kind of had a groove that you were really enjoying. And maybe the difference is a lot of people, one, they either don't know what they want when they're 30, when they're 35, or two, they're not really in school. They're not really told, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, this is how you, and then map out a bit of a path for the individual, right? Rather than just CEO or CAO points, and then, which I hate.
I mean, I think it's a tough one, because when it comes down to it, my personal opinion is that it depends on the individual. Like, if for example, you want to be a brain surgeon, you have to go down the traditional route, because we do not want somebody operating on our brains if they have not studied, for example, in the traditional path. But I think it depends on, one, what environment do you thrive in? If a child is not thriving in the typical academic route, but they're thriving if they're doing music or sports or in entrepreneurial endeavors, then they should be placed there, in my opinion, and vice versa. And I think it really just comes down to recognizing, like, whenever you're pursuing an opportunity, what is the cost and what's the gain? So if you're going to spend 4 years at university, well, then if you're going to gain a lot and the cost is 4 years, but you feel like those 4 years will stand to you and serve you and create more opportunities for you depending on what you want to do, then you go and you commit yourself to it. And if you want to do additional things, then you can spend the evenings doing that, or you can find time in the mornings. I'm a big believer that if you want to do something or multiple things, you can find the time if you make the decision. And as you can see, I'm quite passionate about this topic, because it's something that I feel we limit ourselves, and we're told by people that we can't do certain things, or by the status quo, let's say. But if you really sit down and think about, like, even the question, what do you want to do? Sometimes spending too much time thinking can actually stop us. And I've had issues before where I've had almost a fear of missing out and thinking, oh my God, if I focus only on music, then I'm going to miss all of the possibilities with my business, and vice versa. This was something that I really battled with myself when I was kind of 18, 19 and making certain decisions on how I was going to progress. But then I realized, well, when I'm just doing, things are happening in both regards. Opportunities are being created. I'm happier. And, we'll see what happens, and whatever's meant to be will be. But as long as I'm constantly creating opportunities and doing and actively making things happen, then it will unfold in a way that I will find positive, because I'm positively working towards something.
Absolutely. And I think if you keep an open mind like that, and you're, for want of a better word, I don't know how to say this, but when you're keeping such an open mind, when you're doing lots of different things, when you are 40, you'll have an incredible amount of like a skill set to draw from, rather than somebody who was in that kind of just doing what they did in college for 5 years, then they got the job they were supposed to get because of that, and it's kind of like a domino effect. We talk about sometimes, sometimes we're a little bit harsh on our own Irish people, but me and Mark have talked before about sometimes Irish people like to have a book to read from about their life. Well, okay, this is this chapter. Okay, now next is I get my accounting exams, all right, and then I go into the big four, etc. And the end of that, like, it works out for most people, but I would reckon the amount of people who go into that type of environment, or the amount of people who become solicitors every year, I'd say there's a percentage there that probably wanted to play guitar professionally, but they were kind of, they weren't allowed to to go drop out and go do that. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's something to think about. And as we're kind of building families right now, like it's something to think about for my kids. I don't know how I'm gonna, like, because if they're like you and they're just at the end of secondary school and they've got this, a passion for something, and I don't know if I would tell them or not to to just say, I can tell you what I would do. I don't know. It's going to be an awkward conversation. I don't know.
For me, I'm definitely identifying what my two girls. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. So the 8-year-old's the YouTuber, outgoing, singing, dancing, funny.
Creative all the way.
Creative. But the other one is so attention to detail, like me as a kid. Like I'm an artist, but I'm more like a human photocopier in a way, that I can just paint what I can see. And she's right, that stays inside the lines, criticizes the other one for going outside the lines. So I'm trying to think, right, what are they going to be really good at, and kind of encourage that and double down on that, but at the same time expose them to as much different things as possible, and at the same time make sure they're doing the basics in school. So I'm kind of trying to cover all bases rather than, like, I'm trying to not to be too risky with them, rather than say, right, go ahead, go all into that. I think you can kind of do it all.
Yeah.
If you're careful.
I mean, it's a tough one for me, obviously, because I'm not a parent yet. As I said, hopefully in the future I will be. But one thing that I definitely noticed with my story is I was in a situation where my health was not letting me go to school. And that really frustrated me, because I was always very academic. Like, I'm the kind of person that if I'm doing something, I like to do well with it. So really, I was very bothered by the fact that I was not able to do something that's considered so normal. But I also, eventually, it took me a long time to become comfortable with this, realized that I can sit down and whinge about it and, fall into the category that everyone's telling me I'm going to fall into. So many people, you have no idea, said, oh my God, you're never going to succeed without your leaving certificate. Like, you're going to be a failure. No one's going to open the door for you or opportunities. Or I could do something with the skill set that I'd created that people were actively asking me for help with, and see what happens. And so I started doing that. And then I realized I kind of, again, it's identifying what's the opportunities within it. I realized that this isn't predictable. This isn't going to make certain people in my life happy who wanted me to take a certain route. But there also came a point where I had to trust myself. And so I'm a big believer, whether you're 65, 40, or 17, you've got to come to a point where you can say, okay, I've evaluated this from a perspective of every single route that I can take. What's going to make me happy? What's going to make my parents happy? And so forth. But at the end of the day, what is my gut telling me? Because I'm a big believer that we know what to do. It's just a matter of if we trust ourselves or not. And I don't want to look back in my life and say, you know what, it might have pleased somebody else for me to do this, but I should have trusted myself and say, what if? I'd rather say, oops, that wasn't the right thing, and I've tried it, than said, what if, in terms of opportunities within entrepreneurship, or doing the university degree, depending on what somebody's drawn to and where they feel like they want to go. But basically, I think that the main thing is identifying what your situation is and looking at it from a unique perspective, because we're all individuals and we all have different needs and we all experience different things.
Was there anyone who kind of played a mentor type role for you? Because you were so young, I assume your parents, was there anybody else to kind of push you along, or were you just so self-motivated?
I've always been very self-motivated, but I would say there were definitely people that have influenced me. So I hired my first coach when I was 16. Wow. Did a lot of things, I suppose, kind of early, but at the same time, as I said, I wasn't what I needed to learn. I found someone who could teach me what I wanted to learn, who was based in the Philippines at the time, American guy in the Philippines. And I spoke to him. I was like, I really want to do this. I told him what my situation was, where I was at, where I wanted to go. And I resonated with him, and I decided, okay, I'm going to do coaching with him. And I realized, stemming from then, I've had a lot of different people in my life since who I've hired as a coach, consultant, or somebody to give me a sparring perspective on things, because I feel like you definitely need insight, and it helps so much, whether it's in that traditional environment or hiring a coach, for example. But also different kind of key people who've become close to me that I've met through whether it's like leadership masterminds that I've attended, or entrepreneurial friends who are just, you know, support systems, if you will. I think it's really important to build your inner circle of people. And I've been building that, I suppose, since I was younger. It's definitely changed and evolved over the years, but I have always felt it's so important to surround yourself with people who are where you want to be. And I think that, you know, every room that you walk into, of course, doesn't always happen, but if you can try to be one of the, for lack of a better word, least successful, whatever successful, obviously it's a relative term, but the least successful in the room, then that's what you want to be. That's the position you want to be in, because then you've got so much that you can soak up.
And you know what? It's an important point as well, because that's kind of a hard place to be a lot of the time. Have you ever been, like, I've been in those situations where I'm like, oh, I don't really know that what I'm talking about here, but you know.
Oh my God, stop.
You know what I mean? So I can understand people. It's everything's about relativity. Relativity when you're talking to you know, if you're looking down all the time about kind of like, oh, at least I'm not in that situation, or you know, I think it's easier to do that, you know.
Oh, I connect with that so much. And there was one time in particular, I mean, I've thrown myself into a lot of environments in the past, like, you know, if I think right back to the first fashion event I went to, and I remember I was, you know, 14, 15 years old, and I was thinking, what am I doing here? I literally had, I was getting sweaty. I was nervous. I was shaking. I was saying, I brought my mom with me. And pardon?
Were you interviewing people there? Was that the?
No, it was the first thing I went to was a big fashion show.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously a lot of networking going on, and canapes and, you know, mingling and so forth. And I remember I was terrified. I was like, what do I say to people? I was so nervous, but I threw myself in and I just started talking, and it got easier every time I did it. But the point, to kind of touch on your point, the big one for me, I would say, was the first time I went to Necker Island. So I had the opportunity to go to Necker as part of a leadership gathering in December 2018. And, you know, I think when you are a doer, a lot of the time you're doing things, and then you have these moments of realizations where you think, wow, gosh, this has actually happened. And I remember being stood at the top of Necker Island, and literally Sir Richard was there welcoming us. I just shook his hand, and I was stood there and I was thinking, oh, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
I was 21 years old, and I was thinking to myself, how did I end up here? And I was there with some of the most incredible minds that I have ever met from across continents. Australia, America, South Africa. And I just thought to myself, what am I doing here? But then I realized this is the position I've always wanted to be in. And also when I was there, I realized that when we were in our environments, we were doing conversations and discussions. And there was one dinner in particular that I had worked hard to get to that place. And it was something that through conversation with the other attendees that were there, I realized that I had earned my place at the table. But it's those moments that you have that you're thinking exactly what you just said. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is almost like imposter syndrome. But I think it was for me quite overwhelming to go from feeling imposter syndrome the first couple of days to actually, no, I think I've earned my right to be here, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's a really good example, I would say.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking when you were saying it. I was like, I got to share this.
Okay. So when you're on Necker Island, is it because I've read Losing My Virginity book, and that's kind of when he talks about when he bought that island, Richard Branson, when he bought the island, and like, is it kind of like a hotel that's on there, or is it just go there for the day to do the stuff and then they kind of fly out of there? How does that work?
No, so this specific trip that I went on, we were there for 6 days, and we stayed in the Great House on the island. There was about 20 of us there, and it was a leadership gathering. So there was a topic of the week, and we were talking about how we can create change through our voices and our businesses and so forth. And basically what we did was there was an agenda for every day, and we did a lot of collaborations and discussions and getting to know each other and experiences, basically, as well as spending time with Sir Richard himself. You know, I got to play tennis with him, for example, and have dinner with him. It was completely random. I mean, you know, as I said, imposter syndrome at times you feel, but it was so amazing.
You're like, okay, you know.
I know. I thought to myself, oh my God, I have not played enough tennis recently. And I thought, please, sir, do not let me down. And thankfully it didn't, and we won. But I was nervous. But it was, this specific trip was a mastermind environment. So we were doing a lot of collaborative work and so forth together, but there are also, there are other trips that take place on the island, and I went back in December for the Necker Cup, which is a pro tennis tournament that, you know, featured like, you know, Martina Navratilova, for example, and you know, Sir Nick Faldo, the golf star, and Rod Laver, so many just amazing people. But that was a much bigger event.
This all came from getting involved with like a local mastermind, or did you find these people, like, was it something that online that you connected with people and then this kind of one thing led to another?
So my connection to the Necker Cup came online. Actually, another Irish guy, James Kluski, who is Sir Richard's tennis coach, he saw a picture that I'd posted from my previous Necker trip, and we just started talking and connected, and then he connected me with the group from the Necker Cup. And then the previous trip came from a friend of mine in South Africa, because he had previously been a part of this collective, and he basically said to me, it's a, you know, an invite only event. The organizers asked me if I would like to put somebody forward or suggest someone to become a part of the collective, and I'd like to suggest you. So you can imagine when I received that text message, I thought, oh my God, of course. Sure. So it was quite random, but I met through other conferences and other networks. So it's just, all of it comes down to building relationships, doesn't it? And just
100%,
you know, building connections.
It's so interesting what you can do when you put yourself out there, like we've been saying. That might be the name of this podcast. We'll have to we'll swing back on that. But you know, when you're in your box room, there's only so much that you can do. You need to put yourself on the map. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, Hannah Kathleen, how would you rate your Irish network versus your international network? Your international network seems quite big, and as an Irish person, usually it's who you know in Dublin or whatever. So it seems it's a little bit of a different network that you have.
That's Mark's actual accent, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, some Irish friends of mine / Irish network were actually on Necker in December with me. So I would say that I have been lucky to meet some incredible Irish people, just like I have international contacts. But for me, I kind of did things maybe a little bit backwards to most people. So I started to put myself out there and travel a lot to different events. When I was 18, I went to my first big event. I traveled to Las Vegas by myself for a really big networking entrepreneurial conference that was taking place. There's about 500 people there. I remember, again, I was really nervous. I was like, oh my goodness, what do I have in store? But also very excited. But then from there, I kind of started to just keep putting myself out there, going to events, networking opportunities. And I started to speak when I was about 19, 20, which then took me to different environments. But at the same time I'm Irish, and I started obviously going to events in Ireland. So my network initially began more in the fashion space, but then kind of expanded as I started to meet more people and do more speaking events and podcasts and radio and so forth. So to answer your question, I think it's quite balanced, but also diverse.
Yeah, no, my next question was going to be, how do you see the evolution of networking now? That it's almost, it doesn't matter where you live, really, for now anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. I think it's important to pivot and, again, put yourself out there more. So a lot of people who would be great networkers offline, I've noticed, of course, maybe become a little bit nervous sometimes with the concept of doing a video or going live on Facebook or utilizing social media. Just like some people who are really comfortable in that environment struggle more offline. But I've always been a big proponent of taking a two-pronged approach and always being open to becoming familiar online and becoming familiar offline and putting yourself out there in both capacities. So I think the main thing is just recognizing that right now we can't network in the way we used to. So I can't go and speak at conferences like I usually would, or travel to an event to meet somebody or so forth. So you have to embrace the change and the shift. And I don't think it's going anywhere for the near future. I think that the main thing is just recognizing it and being okay with being uncomfortable. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, is the expression that would ring in my mind.
Couldn't agree more. I think even at the beginning of the COVID stuff, when we, like, yeah. I'm kind of in a weird situation like that as well, because I left Ireland after college, went to Canada for a few years, and then when I came back, my job was actually based in Dublin, but it was in the Nordics completely. So I actually have almost no network in Ireland from a business point of view. It's in Stockholm, it's in Oslo. It's so Mark, that's really weird. And then yesterday I was doing like a webinar in Dubai for, like, it's a strange kind of job that I have. So
Yeah.
I'm not out there as much in Ireland, but it's something I could definitely work on, especially maybe some kind of localized stuff, because there's loads of stuff going on here where I live. So I need to get out there. But the what I would like to dig into is, do you know the way you've at this stage you're going to these things when you're 18, which is hilarious, by the way, because I know that you can't go into a casino there. They're so strict with.
It was so awkward. I mean,
Yeah.
there was another time when I spoke in Vegas and I think I was 20 at the time, and I actually couldn't check myself in. So before I traveled there, the hotel wouldn't let me book organize my hotel accommodation because I was under 21. And they were like, no, like you can't stay here without a guardian. And I said, but I need to come for business. Like I'm speaking at the conference.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I mean, we sorted it out in the end, but it was kind of hilarious for lack of a better term.
So we've talked to loads of people on the podcast who I think would be great speakers, and they've got great stories to share. They might have never came on a podcast before, never really put themselves out there before that. And then at the beginning, like you said, it's kind of a little bit tense when they really open up. And we've got some great stories that we've kind of brought out there. But how does someone say if they do have a great story, if they have a good message to tell and stuff like that? What are the steps in starting that type of career? Do you have to be quite kind of passive and say, okay, I'm going to put out a lot of content out and hopefully people come back? Or is there another route to go down to get into that lane, mentorship, or what would you suggest?
I think that there can be a combination. Do you mean specifically in like building your personal brand on social media, or do you mean just building your personal brand?
I just mean like getting into the kind of speaking industry, speaking at conferences, that type of thing. Does the personal brand come first, or does that come from doing stuff like that? Which one would be?
I would say it can kind of be like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I think that the main thing is to identify, at least when you're starting out, of course, we're talking about personal brand, right? We've talked a lot about diversifying yourself and doing lots of different things, but I think initially you should choose a certain area that you want to focus on and kind of saturate. And once you've identified what topics you want to speak on, specifically if it's speaking, you have a few options. So one is to host your own event. Why wait for a stage? Instead, create one. So you could host an event, like let's say right now in Dublin, this is obviously pre or post COVID potentially, set up an Eventbrite, set up a meetup group, promote it on social media, let people know it's happening, tell your network, tell your friends, and then bring together a group of people who want to either communicate, collaborate, or learn about a certain topic that you can speak on. Maybe even bring in a guest speaker if you want to create more credibility and edify, what you're creating. But also to just start putting yourself out there. So letting people know, like if you have a certain topic that you want to speak on, contacting your network or posting on Facebook, something as simple as, I'm very excited in 2021 to put more emphasis on speaking opportunities and sharing my specific message on X, Y, and Z. If you have a podcast, if you have a stage, if you have a coaching group that you would like me to share some of this information on, then send me a message.
Perfect. Like this is something that we've talked about before as well, where the competition isn't as fierce where there's not a lot of people. So there's loads of people. Say if you want to do, if you want to be a Salesforce software consultant or something, there's lots of people with those skills that are kind of in the shadows. No one really knows them. If there was someone who was putting themselves out there, who was giving talks on this, where do you think the business is going to go for that type of thing? It's so. But it is the hard thing to say. It's something, and here's another. I'm not having to go at Irish people here, but I'm on because of the Canadian one. But I'm saying that it is so hard to say I'm an expert in something.
Oh my God!
So hard to say.
You're singing to the choir here. I resonate with that so much because I remember when I first started going and connecting with Americans, for example, I really admired how outgoing and just forward they were with, this is what I do, I'm so great at this, you should inquire with me about whatever I'm doing. And I remember thinking to myself, that just does not, as an Irish person, I feel like we have tall poppy syndrome. And so it's kind of oh, don't get too high, because it just doesn't sit with us. We're a very kind of quiet, behind the scenes personality type, I would say, at least from my experience. Of course, that's to generalize. But I think that the main thing is, you don't even have to brand yourself as an expert. Just be a practitioner, share what you're doing. I think the saying that Gary Vee brings out a lot, document, don't create, is really relevant. So just let people know, hey, I'm doing this. You know, I mean, like for example, didn't expect to get into property investing so soon, but then I've just put some posts out on my social media saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm now really excited to be involved in property investing. This is what the process has been like. And now people are contacting me. I literally got a message of somebody who wants to do a podcast episode and discussion about how that came to be.
Yeah.
Just because I shared some posts about what I was doing.
The document don't create is so good as well, because then it's real. It's not, you're going to be doing it anyway. Just have somebody.
Exactly. And I think it takes away the pressure of like trying to make it like seem fancy or over the top. If you just talk about what you're doing, from a place of course, you know, wanting to give value, but also just saying this is like a diary of my life, you know, I'm documenting it for myself as much as I am for you, then it becomes so much more natural. And that was something that I actually struggled with for a while, because I was like, oh, you know, I almost didn't want to share everything because I felt like it was too much, and it was like too just not sitting right with my, let's say, Irish personality. But then I realized, you know, it's important to share it, because like another message I got today is of an entrepreneur that I met at an event in 2018. He told me we sat beside each other at an event, and he subsequently saw a post about me that I shared around my health and that whole journey and how things developed for me. And he just messaged me and said, you know, his daughter's the same age as I was when I started my blog, and she's been going through certain things, and he really wanted to show her me as like an example of how you can get through those bad situations. And I kind of looked at my phone and I was like, oh my God, like, wow, that really made me kind of, do you know, I don't even have words. And that made me realize that if we're not sharing what we're doing, then there's always somebody who needs to hear what you have to say. And to get in line with what we were talking about in terms of, oh gosh, I don't know what to say or how to say it, or if I'm an expert, there's somebody who needs to hear your message and who will benefit from hearing your message, who will be inspired by hearing your message, or who will want to work with you, who you'll then help through your business or whatever it may be. And it gives you, I think, a lot of joy when you can accomplish those moments.
Absolutely. And if you don't put anything out there, it's hard for anybody to learn from what you're doing already. Like we've talked about that before as well, the way we're obsessed with not failing, or obsessed with not or looking bad. But me and Mark said before, like, it's only the wins that matter. It's only the wins that count. Like I've said it before, but I'm in North Wicklow here, and Katie Taylor is just from up the road here.
Amazing.
And I was saying that no one ever introduces Katie Taylor as Olympic loser Katie Taylor. You know, she lost in the Olympics, but she's the Olympian, she's the gold medalist, she's the world champion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the only the wins stick. So I think that if you have that kind of mindset, you don't have to kind of hide in the shadows. You can put yourself out there. Maybe somebody like we started this podcast in January when it was just me and Mark in this room, and now thousands and thousands of people have listened to us talk.
Incredible.
You know, shite for an hour a week here. So my point is not to blow up my own horn there, but it's just to kind of like say, you know, if you put yourself out there, those people have come back to us as well, and they like email us and they say, you know, they love the podcast. People in like random places like in Australia or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, okay. So Hannah Kathleen, we've got a bit of a tradition here. We're pushing time already. I know we could talk about these kind
I know. I feel like we've
done the whole thing here, Mark, but I haven't even done. So we usually going to finish off the podcast with our guests with a bit of a lightning round or a quick fire question. All right. They don't have to be quick fire answers, but this is kind of Mark's party piece, comes in at the end and kind of gets a little bit of an insight here.
Okie dokie. All right. So what do we need to do?
So Mark's you
just need to answer these questions.
Great.
Over it.
Okay. You guys are kind of breaking up slightly for me, so let me know if you don't hear me properly. So the first one, what apps do you use the most?
Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook.
Okay. Is there any apps that you've turned off and you don't use it anymore?
I don't use a lot of apps. I use mostly apps for communication, or if it's connected to work somehow. So I wouldn't say there's anything I've really turned off, but I don't download a lot of apps for the sake of it, if that makes sense.
And what's your favorite social media and why?
I would say Instagram. I love the curation of like content lifestyle, especially like inspiration, motivation, all of that stuff, and kind of seeing the stories, especially like kind of raw, real updates of what people have going on.
I love it too. I find myself on Instagram the whole time, and I've kind of, like I said, like curated my feed. So it's loads of like National Geographic stuff or photographers and stuff, like endlessly fascinating. So they've done something right over there, Mark.
For sure.
For sure.
Okay, what's the best business idea you've never acted upon?
Oh, that's a good question. The best business idea I've never acted upon. Gosh, I don't know. I think you have me stumped there.
We can give you some examples of some poor business ideas that we've had.
Okay, throw some ideas. Maybe it will remind me of something.
When I was, I was a good bit younger than you at this age. I was probably about 18. I was doing e-commerce stuff back when e-commerce was just eBay kind of thing, and I wanted to start my own business called executivesockclub.com, where we send you a new pair of socks every day. So when you wake up in the morning, new socks every day, you feel like $1 million. Mark told me not to invest in that, I think, back in the day. So thank you, Mark, for that one.
I think somebody actually did that. Is it
it's a business now. They're based out of Switzerland. That could have been me, but you stole my dream from me, Mark, when I was a child. Anyway, what's the next question there, Mark?
Next question. What time do you get up in the morning and what time do you go to sleep?
Oh gosh, that varies. Sometimes I get up at 5:36. Other times I get up at, usually if I've had a late night, it would be 9 at the latest, but it depends, because a lot of the time, like for example, I had a call with New Zealand this morning at 7:30 a.m. So I was up early to prepare for that and do other things. But sometimes, alternatively, depending on what time zone I'm speaking to, I'm talking to somebody at 10 or 11 p.m. at night, in which case sometimes I stay up late and get things done and then get up a little bit later. But it kind of depends. At the moment, though, I'm trying to focus on doing less really late in the evenings and kind of shifting calls earlier in the day. But it kind of depends. If there's something urgent or if there is an idea that needs to be acted upon and it's, midnight, then I'm going to burn the midnight candle and get it done.
Okay. I think Mark could take a little bit more sleep. We always trying to push him to do that. He doesn't sleep very much anyway. That's
not going to happen.
I hear that.
If you could do business anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I would say that I feel quite lucky to have been able to connect with a lot of entrepreneurs and companies around the world. I would say if I wanted to put more energy into growth, I think there's a lot of opportunities in North Cyprus. So this is where I have began my property investing journey, at somewhere that I want to spend a lot more time, because I feel like it's one of the places that's really going to boom, in my personal opinion, in the next 10, 20 years.
And what do you have, like a family connection to Cyprus, or do you have some friends from there? How did you come across that? I know this is kind of off topic now, but
again, networking. So basically, I went on this trip with a few entrepreneurs that I know. We just decided we were going to spend a week masterminding back in 2018, and then I ended up going back for the second time in 2018 and again 2019, and then the opportunity came up and it just made sense, and I thought, I've wanted to get into property for a while, loved the project in question, and just decided to jump in. So then that's why I was there a couple of weeks ago, to finalize all the details and work on the interiors and contracts and so forth. So it's very random again.
Was it difficult to actually get things like done there? Was it like, did you have to hire a lot of people to figure that out? Because a lot of people would love to own a property abroad, but it's one of the biggest things that they worry about, is like, am I going to know what I need to do and everything like that? Did you have some time there?
Well, one thing that I would say is, again, it comes down to connecting with the right people. So I'm very lucky to have built a really good database of people who really know what they're doing over there and know the market very well, which is why property is something I'm going to be spending a lot more time doing moving forward, and helping other people actually find the right opportunities for them to invest in the Mediterranean, specifically in North Cyprus, because there is, as you said, there's so many opportunities, but a lot of the time it's, where do I start? And for me, the process was very quick and efficient because I spent the time developing the relationships first.
So interesting. Sorry, Mark, I hijacked that one. What's the last question for the rapid fire here? That wasn't rapid at all. Go on.
Sorry.
We could do a whole other podcast on that one.
Yeah.
Right. Just a couple more. So, how much money is enough money?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the biggest thing is, again, that it's relative. It depends on the individual and what you want to do. But for me, I look at it as a vehicle to create more opportunities, to connect with more people. So obviously, one thing that a lot of people say is money is the root of all evil. I think a lot of us grew up with the expression, you know, money doesn't grow on trees, and that mindset towards money. But from my perspective, I've definitely worked to shift my view on it and to look at it now as, if we want to create opportunities for ourselves, we want to create generational wealth for our families, depending on what it is, like this is something that I'm working towards for myself, we have to have resources to create more opportunities. So I would say it's relative on what you want to do, but you should look at it as a resource that you create as much as possible of, in my opinion, and work to diversify and create multiple income streams so that you can create more opportunities, but purely looking at it as a vehicle to do that.
I like that answer.
Good answer.
No, we've had so many different answers on that one as well. Like one guy just said 12 million. It was very
wow.
Okay, well that's fair enough. Well, good luck with
fair
that.
enough, yeah.
All right, Mark.
If you could advise someone to learn one skill, what would it be?
Networking. And put yourself out there.
Cool. One more, right?
Last one. Let's do
it. What book would you recommend to the 18-year-old Hannah Kathleen?
What book would I recommend to 18-year-old
Which wasn't that long ago.
Hannah Kathleen? I would say, just one. Probably The Secret. I think that was a big thing for me in terms of shifting your mindset and just opening yourself up to the fact that you can do whatever you set your mind to, and that your mind is a very powerful tool to create whatever you want to create.
Absolutely. Interesting. Mark, we're going to do a podcast on The Secret one day. I've never read it, but I've heard about it so many times. Let's do that. Sometimes we just break down a book if we're just in the...
I think it's a really interesting one. I mean, you know, different people have different feelings towards it, but I think when you can just realize that your mind is such a powerful tool and it can help you realize things that you didn't think possible, then I really believe that's been applied in my life to so many different things that I didn't expect to happen, that, you know, a thought that manifested itself, let's say, created these opportunities. So for sure, read the book.
I often think about that sometimes, and with things that happen, really great things happen in my life that just came from an idea, and then it is really strange. I know I talked about that before, Mark, as well on the podcast. But anyway, so Hannah Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today. We're for the first time we've ever on time here, so that's great. So we'll be pushing this out on the socials, all that type of stuff. But we do appreciate your time today, and hope you have a great night. Talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was so nice to get to know you both.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Perfect. I'll just stop that one as well.